would like to welcome members of the press here today. Thanks for coming. I'm James McConkey. I'm a member of the law firm of Parker and McConkey. And I'd like to make some introductions just to help people know who's here and the attorneys that are representing the Petitos. We're honored to have Gabby's parents here today. Gabby has 4 parents who loved and raised her since she was a little child. Jim and Tara's loss, and I'll introduce them in a moment, is the same, but their names do not appear in the caption of the lawsuit because of the way the law is written in the state of Utah. If you could just raise your hand, maybe Joe, starting down there. This is Joe Petito, and then Tara. And then we have Nicole, Gabby's mother, and then Jim right there. Okay. There are 2 law firms involved, Parker and McConkey. The lawyers who are representing them from that firm are Brad Parker, Brian Stewart, and Steve Jensen, and myself. Also the firm of Zimmerman Boer, which is an appellate firm. Parker and McConkey is a litigation firm. And Fred Voros, if you'd just introduce yourself, is a member of that firm. He was the retired presiding judge of the Utah Court of Appeals. And we also have Dick Baldwin, who's with us. And Dick is well known for his expertise in the complexities of trial strategy and litigation and presenting issues at the appellate level. It's one of Utah's most respected firms who know and understand the appellate process. We will proceed by making a couple of short statements. I'll make a brief statement, and I'll ask Dick Baldwin to talk to you for a moment about the document that was filed this morning at 8 a.m., the complaint, and briefly just talk about the causes of action. And then Brian Stewart will speak for a moment and make a statement and answer questions about the lawsuit in general. And then we'll take 15 or 20 minutes and have the family respond to questions. However, the family will not answer questions involving the facts of the case. That's off limits. But as you know, there's an ongoing FBI investigation, and our own investigation continues. But they're here to talk about Gabby and their loss and the purpose of bringing this lawsuit. This morning at 8 o'clock, a lawsuit was filed, the primary cause of which is a wrongful death action, alleging that if the Moab police had followed the requirements of the Utah law, the Utah statutes on domestic violence, Gabby would still be alive today. The family would like me to emphasize that the purpose of this lawsuit is to honor Gabby's legacy by demanding accountability and working for change in the system to protect victims of domestic abuse and violence and to prevent such tragedies in the future. For that purpose, they've established a foundation which has been very successful. And you can ask them about some of the successes that they have had and the things that they have done to make life safer for those who are involved in intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence and domestic violence is an insidious problem in our society because the signs and the symptoms to a layperson don't seem threatening, and they're often hidden and they go unrecognized. All these signs and symptoms were present when the police interviewed Gabby and Mr. Laundrie in Moab. And although these signs and symptoms are not recognized by members of the general public, They are recognized by police officers who are trained to stop and intervene in these kinds of situations. Many times, they're the last stop on a course of conduct that can lead to serious violence and death. The signs and symptoms are there when the police intervened, but they were not acted upon, even though Utah law required it. Domestic violence is a poison, a silent killer that could very well affect our own lives and our own loved ones. I'll ask Dick now to speak briefly on the causes of action.
Thank you, Jim. This case involves a horrible tragedy where the Petito family suffered the ultimate loss of their daughter. And obviously, litigation can't bring Gabby back, but we believe Utah law provides them an avenue for obtaining some form of justice in this case. In the complaint filed this morning, we've asserted a couple of categories of negligence claims. The first category relates to the way that the officers handled the police stop, their encounter with Gabby and Brian, and describes how the officers failed to recognize telltale signs of domestic abuse to be able to see what was really happening here and misidentifying Brian as the victim in this case, when clearly he was not. Additionally, the officers, they manipulated they intentionally sought out loopholes of Utah law to be able to avoid enforcing non-discretionary law in the state of Utah. The second category of negligence claims that we've asserted are directed at the police department level. First, that the police department failed to properly train their officers to be able to handle these situations and properly identify the aggressor in a domestic violence situation. Secondly, that the department failed to properly hire and screen applicants for officers and hired officers who were entirely unfit to be police officers in the city of Moab. And so those are the causes of actions we've asserted. I'll turn it over to Brian to discuss in more detail what's happening with the litigation.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you, Jim. We appreciate you being here today. I'm going to read a brief statement regarding the lawsuit that was filed this morning and some of the information that we've been learning just recently, and that you've been learning just recently through the lawsuit and through some reports that have already been published. And then I will take any questions that you have and give you the best answers that we can now based on the information that we have. It is an honor to represent Gabby here today, and it has been an honor to represent her parents, Nicole and Jim, Joe and Tara. Their resilience and determination to use their tragedy to effect positive change and save lives has been an inspiration to millions. Gabby's story has already saved many lives by giving victims the courage to report abuse and to leave violent relationships. They did not take this decision to file a lawsuit lightly. Their desire has never been to simply blame police for their loss. They are grateful for the many devoted officers that take an oath to uphold the law, to serve and protect. They relied on these officers to uphold the law, to serve and protect their daughter. However, when it became clear that the officers involved did not fully investigate the threat that Gabby faced and did not follow the law, they knew they owed it to Gabby to demand accountability and change. They will continue to do that difficult work through the Gabby Petito Foundation and through this civil lawsuit. Now, recently, brave witnesses have come forward with other evidence that has come to light that add new dimension and understanding to how the officers performed in their investigation and their treatment of Gabby that day. The witnesses and evidence that have come forward have demonstrated that Officer Pratt himself has been a domestic abuser who has misused authority and threats of violence to control and intimidate sexual partners, making clear why Officer Pratt was fundamentally biased in his approach to the investigation, identifying with Gabby's abuser, ignoring the victim and her injuries, and intentionally looking for loopholes to get around the requirements of Utah law and his duty to protect Gabby. Based on what we have learned from these multiple sources, we believe that the Moab City Police Department knew or should have known that Officer Pratt, who has a history of pervasive professional and sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment and intimate partner violence, was unfit and unsafe to be a police officer. We hope that they will do that investigation now and take appropriate action. The legislature foresaw the risk of injury and death that happened in this case. And they wrote the statute in such a way that they gave the responsibility to intervene to police officers, to law enforcement, to enforce the law as written by the legislature. And Officer Pratt understood that. Gabby's death was foreseeable and preventable. In a chilling description of Gabby's life-threatening situation and a stunning self-indictment of his own decision to find a loophole to avoid enforcing the law, Officer Pratt stated at the scene, "You know why the domestic assault code is there. It's there to protect people. The reason they don't give us discretion on these things is because too many times women who are at risk want to go back to their abuser. They just wanted him to stop, and they don't want to be separated. They don't want him to be charged. They don't want him to go to jail. And then they end up getting worse and worse treatment, and they end up getting killed." Nevertheless, Pratt intentionally chose not to follow the statute and even stated, "I don't care if we use the actual letter of the law." We believe that Gabby would be alive today if he had done his job to enforce the law as written and protected Gabby that day. I'll now take a few questions and do my best to elucidate any points that are unclear.
The Supreme Court has a high threshold for law enforcement lawsuits. Are you laying out the case why you believe that you can overcome that? Because the Supreme Court's been pretty adamant.
Well, I mean, we believe that these officers in this situation clearly did not follow the law, and it's clear that the statute is not discretionary. It's mandatory that they effect an arrest and intervene when these circumstances are present. And so this wasn't an act of discretion. It was a knowing violation of the requirement of the law.
So are you saying that all police departments need to be making arrests in situations like this?
I'm saying that
use the word mandatory.
I'm saying that all police departments need to follow the law as it is written.
Since government immunity shields people from torts in Utah, why does statute matter? And can you explain the constitutional arguments on page 4 of the complaint?
Right, and I'm going to let Dick answer the questions on the governmental immunity. I think he's the best person to answer those.
So without getting too much into the weeds, a unique feature of Utah is that Utah's Constitution, since its founding, has protected the right of action for wrongful death. And the Utah Constitution provides that that right shall not be abrogated. And so our argument, we believe that Utah law protects a claim, including against officers or people who've been given immunity for acts, including negligence or anything else, that leads to a wrongful death under the Utah Constitution as it was originally understood, an originalist framework for the Utah Constitution.
Are there any other questions with respect to the pleadings or the
I wanted
statute?
to ask about what Moab City said in their statement to us this morning, and that is that no one could have predicted the tragedy that befell Gabby based on that one encounter. How would you respond to that?
I would respond to that saying that the legislature foresaw this situation, and that's why they wrote the law the way that they did. And Officer Pratt also foresaw that outcome. Not that it would happen every time, but that it was a potential outcome when these circumstances were present. And he said in no uncertain terms that this is why they don't have discretion to not arrest. And nevertheless, he chose to try and find a way to not follow the statute that day. And so we believe, in response to Moab's statement, that that their officers should have followed the law, and that if they had done that, that Gabby would still be alive. Okay. I think we'll probably allow some time to ask questions.
You're welcome to address your questions to a particular member of the family. They won't answer questions on the facts of this case, the ongoing investigation, but they will respond on how they feel and why they're bringing this lawsuit. So feel free to go ahead.
Are they going to approach the mics or?
Well, I think if you'll ask the question, then I'll have them come up and stand here, recognizing that you need to have their voices loud and clear.
Joseph, can you tell us a little bit about the intentions of this lawsuit? I know James talked a little bit about it, but from the family's perspective, could you talk a little bit about that and why you're doing this, pursuing this?
Some things need to change, and I guess there's been some things in the past that I have read, and changes haven't happened, and those changes need to come, and unfortunately this is the way that's the best way to have those changes made, and it's that simple. No one here, the four of us, don't want to be here. We'd give it up in a second if she was back. Are there any other questions for me? Thank you, everyone.
Nicole, could we ask you a couple of questions as well, too? Part of the lawsuit was the loss that you and Joseph and your loved ones have suffered on this. Could you expand a little bit about that? Tell the public what this has done to you and your family.
Well, we're pretty broken because of it. We miss her so much. But we saw it as an opportunity to help other families. Again, I would reiterate that we'd have her back in a heartbeat because she's what's important. But we feel we need to bring justice because she could have been protected that day. There are laws put in place to protect victims, and those laws were not followed. And we don't want this to happen to anybody else. And it keeps happening. They know it keeps happening. So we just want to stop it.
Notice this picture behind here. Obviously, I'm thinking that maybe perhaps you guys chose this. Can you say why we're seeing this picture? What does it mean to you? Is this one of your favorite photos?
She's so happy. She's just happy. That's who she was. That smile. She was a light, and she still is a light. She's helping so many people through us. We have stories. People tell us that her story inspired them to get out of a relationship, or inspired them to change their life and just be a better person and travel, whatever it is. She's inspiring so many people. We're just proud of her.
I know this is hindsight, but did she ever give any of you any indication that there was trouble on the horizon?
Yeah, we're not really, I've said it before, we didn't know that Brian was who he was. We just didn't know. There was no indication of that.
Talk about your foundation. This is something that you guys are very proud of. And I think the attorney said that many lives have been saved because of this, because of Gabby. She's a light to many people. Talk about that.
We just, like I said, saw it as an opportunity to help people, and through the foundation, we were able to reach millions of people all over the world. And, you know, we're helping other organizations. We're partnering with them that help missing persons as well as domestic violence. We just hope that our foundation can bring the changes needed on that level. As parents, we want to make a lot of changes, and we hope our foundation can help with that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, it's Gabby's story really resonated with a lot of people across the world, and I guess they saw her in themselves and recognized their potential for the situation that they were in being bad. And we've received a lot of messages from people that since we had started the foundation and we started partnering with a lot of these other organizations out there and trying to bring more awareness to the world about it, that it helped recognize that they were potentially in bad situations, and now they're doing better. Initially, when we had started the foundation, we had partnered with the Domestic Violence Hotline. They were one of the first organizations to reach out to us, among others. And they allowed us to put a link on our website directly to their website, where someone could go to them for help 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can get online assistance with that. They can speak to somebody right there, and they have additional services they can provide. And in the short time from the time in October of last year when we got that up on our website, linked to their website to get help, to right around the beginning of December, they had told us that in that short time alone, that they were able to track over 350 people that had come to our website looking for help, looking for assistance, and were directed to them. And not only went to their website and just looked at it, but were actively receiving help for their situation that they were in. So for us, that was monumental to hear that, you know, in just a short time, that many people were impacted, and that number has grown since that point on. And we've had more organizations that specialize in domestic violence, even missing persons, search and rescue organizations reach out to us, mainly because of the notoriety of Gabby's case, we believe, but because people seem to respond to it and listen to it And we've been able to start working with them behind the scenes and quietly do what we can to assist other people.
I just want to add something here. To everybody that's watching or watching this later, if you're in a situation where you feel you're in a domestic violence problem, issue, there are numbers to call, organizations to help you. Reach out. They will help. You guys have a lot of affiliates here and stuff like that. I would ask you to go back to them and put up a link to those organizations, whether it be the National Domestic Violence Hotline or a local or national missing person site, so that people can get help, because they are the ones that matter now. And they might not know where to turn, so when they see something like this, because this story resonates with them, hopefully they can get the help and not end up on a picture behind us. So I ask for that from everybody. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And we'll bring it to a close. Yes.
The witness statements that you referenced earlier on the Officer Pratt, is that just witness? Is there other evidence that you point to his behavior before he was hired?
There are multiple witnesses, and they've provided corroborating evidence that, but that information, but those are not available yet. But we imagine will become available during the discovery process in the litigation. Thanks.
You had also mentioned the term $50 million in the lawsuit. Can you talk about damages received specifically?
So the number that was put in the notice of claim months ago and then in the lawsuit was $50 million. Ultimately, any damages awarded will be decided by a jury and not by lawyers or by the plaintiffs. We added that number as a symbol of the severity of this problem in our country, and how important that it is, and how grave the loss is that this family has suffered. But the intent of that number is to show the severity of the problem and the gravity of their loss. But ultimately, it will be up to a jury to determine what that number should be.
And I'm assuming that number would be used for the foundation. Is there any plans for that the family has? That?
Well, obviously, no amount of money would compensate them for their loss, but their intent is to use those funds or any funds recovered to help support them in their efforts, which they'll be engaged in for the rest of their lives. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. We'll call it a close, and thanks for coming.